everyone, and thanks for joining us again on the Seafood Matters podcast. Joining us today is renowned skipper John Roberts. John has been a successful fisherman all his days, sailing out of Grimsby on the Humber. John and I have been close friends going back many years. Welcome, John. Great to have you here. I'm so pleased we eventually managed to get together on the Seafood Matters podcast.
Good morning, Jim, and thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here with you.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear. John, I would like to start our chat today by informing our listeners of your book that you've written. I also want to add that it gives everything we want from a book. It's interesting, informative, and highly entertaining, that's for sure. And I find it fascinating how you have managed to write the book in a format as you're reading it comes across as if you and your fellow crewmen are speaking on the deck of a fishing boat. It is a wonderful read, which I strongly recommend our listeners go out and buy a copy. The title is Welcome Home, Fish or No Fish. John, that phrase, welcome home, fish or no fish, runs through the book like a heartbeat. What did it mean to you personally, hearing it after a long trip?
It's a story of its own, the actual phrase. Many parts of the town, neighbours would say that to fishermen when they got home, came off the dock to the houses, and family and friends would often say, welcome home, fish or no fish. The story of it all, I guess, is the fishing industry in Grimsby was the life and soul of the town. It was the heart of the town. And if you came home with a lot of fish, then you got a good payday. If you came home with no fish, then there was no payday. It was very poor. But in the town, when you left school as a young boy, you either went to sea on the ships, or you worked on the dock processing fish, or maintaining the vessels, manufacturing fishing equipment, and everything, the blacksmiths, the trades of fitters for the steamships and the diesels, and everything was revolved around a service to the fishing industry. Even the shops in town, we had what we called 3-day millionaires. When the fishermen came home after 3 weeks at sea, and they got their pay, 3 weeks' pay, and if it was a good trip, they went in Freeman Street, one of the main shopping town centre in the town, and they spent a lot of money. Basically, I think it was compensating the family for not being there, for spending so much time away. And so that, but in answer to your question, welcome home, fish or no fish, I think that's sort of a respect or a love, and the people saying, it's good to have you back, whether you've been successful this trip or not. So to have you safely home, that was the meaning of the phrase.
Yeah, of course, back means you're still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly. And if you had a bad trip, next trip's going to be better. There was always that positive,
It's similar to a lot of fishing communities. I can remember when we were younger in my fishing village, Helmsdale I'm from, my mother told me the local butcher would tell her, I know when the boats have had a good week. You could see it in the till. That's the butcher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's absolute,
John, it's a nice touch dedicating the book to your wife, Michelle. It's interesting how you also refer to your mistress, the sea. Do you think everyone in the fishing industry could relate to that?
Yeah, I think maybe not everyone, but a vast majority of seamen, whether they're fishermen or not, but seamen in general, they get a relationship with the sea, and like I uh, described it as my mistress, and that because spending so much time sharing your life with the sea, it was like a mistress, so, and Michelle, like many fishermen's wives, they were wonderful people, very very strong-minded, and they were when the guys were away for 3 weeks at a time, they were mother and father for the children, and they had to manage. They got a small wage for each week, but it all had to be managed to food and buying coal, that type of thing, and just running the house in general. But they had to do it alone. And then later on, as we got the capabilities improved with telephone calls, link calls, and then you could share your troubles and their troubles, and you could support each other, albeit through a telephone call.
There were, as you said, there were strong women. My mother, when we were children, my father be at sea, my mother would say something like, "Look, if you don't stop that, I'll tell your father when he's home." But we were as careful we didn't get a swipe from our mother because we never ever got one from our father, although it was a
Mm.
threat.
Aye. Well, Michelle, I must admit, Michelle never ever threatened the children with "wait till your father gets home," But as you say, if they were getting out of line and she jumped out the chair, they were running.
John, you're right about going to sea from Grimsby as a young man before the Cod Wars obviously changed everything. What kind of fisherman would you say that shaped you into?
Wow. In in the beginning, I had a young brother born. He was born in 1961. He was 11 years after me, and because the family were all coming to visit and see the new baby, and uh, one of my uncles, he was skipper of a Ross trawler, the Ross Jackal, and he said, "Do you want to come away with me for a trip?" And it was to help the family, taking me out of the way while got the new baby settled in, sort of thing. And so off I went with my uncle Harry, and on the Ross Jackal, we fished at Cape Wrath and Nun Rock, and from that trip forward, I was smitten with the sea. I never wanted to do anything else. And every holiday from school, summertime, I would go and get what we called a pleasure trip. I did a couple more pleasure trips with Uncle Harry, and then when he wasn't, his ship wasn't available, I went on a few other ships. And the last pleasure trip I went on was the Ross Tiger when I was 14, and the Ross Tiger now is lying in the Grimsby Fishing Heritage Centre as a museum piece, and people can tour the vessel, and there's trawler guides there to tell people all about the life on board. And I did that myself when I first retired in 2015. Say the Ross Tiger was very special to me because I did that pleasure trip. Then later on in my career, I went deckhand on her. I went third hand, which is like a bosun or second mate type thing position. And then I went mate on her. I even went skipper of her for a short time while a colleague, Dennis Avery, was having holidays. And then I went to the Fishing Heritage Centre as a trawler guide, showing people around the Ross Tiger. She's 70 years old this year, I think, the Ross Tiger. And she's one of the famous, what they call the catboats, the Ross catboats, although the Jackal is a dog. And the last of the catboats was called the Zebra. But my personal feeling about the naming of the ships, the Ross trawlers, they were all named after Royal Navy ships or even shore bases. So they had ships named like the Revenge, Renown, Repulse, Invincible, and Illustrious, those sort of names. So the big ships. Then the smaller ships, the catboats. The only one I couldn't find in a Royal Naval history was the Ross Genet, but there was a USS Genet. But whether that's the only fault I can find with my theory of Royal Naval names. The smaller ones, the bit what we call the bird class, they were Cormorant, Mallard, Kestrel, that sort of names. They were all sloops or even frigates, even some of them, and some were shore bases. I think there was one at Scapa and one at down in Reading or somewhere like that. It's probably a radio station, but that was my feeling of the naming of the catboats.
You've actually, John, brushed there on the very next point I was going to ask you and chat to you about, because I've taken note reading the book, and you're obviously mentioning a lot of the names of the boats that ships, as I would call them, that you've been on. And you've answered a question there. I always associated as the cat boats, but it was obviously different classes, and there was birds as well. And you've answered it there when you say about naval ships as well. But I can remember from my young days, I used to look forward to the fishing news, because you would be looking to see which trawler was in and broke the previous record. And there was football boats, the Nottingham Forest, Wolverhampton Wanderers. Am I right in saying books and authors?
Yeah, certainly the consolidated fisheries ships. They were all football teams. Spares, Huddersfield Town, Blackburn Rovers, Notts Forest, and Notts County. There was numerous football teams. The only one they had that wasn't a football team was called the Churchill, and I'm not sure the actual reason, but I think the Churchill was built for another company and then taken over by Consolidated, but with the agreement that they wouldn't change the name from Churchill, as a tribute to Winston Churchill, I guess. Crampin's trawlers, all their ships were named after cricketers. Truman, Paget, Bradman, Yardley, and so on, so. And then there was the V&A boats, Bavaria, Valinda, Viselma, and I think they would belong to Lettons, I think, but Lettons became Associated Fisheries later. And well, what else was there? The regiments: Coldstreamer, Royal Lynx, Black Watch. They were another type of names, so.
And of course, when you say that, it's obviously the different companies that had their names, different themes.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, and it was a strange sort of way that they used to run the dock, and the employment force. You could, if one company didn't have any work and you was looking for a job, you could go to the other companies. But sometimes, especially mates and skippers, if they stepped out of line and they were out of a ship and go to another company, the company may have a job, but they would call the company that you were leaving and saying, we want to offer your man, this man, a job, and the office review would sort of keeping you out of work just to teach you a lesson. They would say, "Oh, we haven't finished with him yet. We need him in our employ." Although they were just teaching you a lesson. My grandfather, he was a Scotsman, and he was mate in Hull and Grimsby, and he very often he would speak out of turn, and so the family had to move from Hull to Grimsby because he couldn't get work in Hull, and then he would blot his copybook in Grimsby and have to go back to Hull. So, but and my grandmother, she said he one particular time he was having words with one of the owners on the fish market. The owner said, he said, you should be careful, because you're saying too much. And my grandfather showed him his hands and he said, you can't take these away. And the trawler owner said, no, but I can stop them working. so, and that's how it was,
Hard times, eh? Hard life.
Oh,
Hard
yes,
people,
yes,
hard
yeah.
people. Wow.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Just going the names, when you were talking about the names there's one that springs to mind. I'm sure it would have been a boat. The Somerset Vaughan.
Somerset Bourne, yes, that were the whole ships, yeah.
All right, okay.
Yes. Joseph Conrad, Hammond Innes.
Yeah, Hammond Innes. Yeah, I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it was great times then.
Ian Fleming,
Oh,
and
God.
there were fine ships.
Yeah.
The whole ships were really spectacular. Many of them.
Yeah.
Majestic ships.
Oh, absolutely. It was great times, great times. And when
The sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, even for like me, when I was through my working life and I was heavily involved in both Humber ports, Hull and Grimsby, just being there, you were just part of the buzz. It was just an amazing environment to be in.
Yes, it was like from midnight. When I think in Aberdeen they're called porters, and Hull they're called bobbers, Grimsby were lumpers. They were the squad of men that unloaded the ships, and they would start at midnight normally, unloading ships and getting the fish laid out on the market in boxes, and then the fish sales would start about 7 o'clock. And as soon as the fish was sold, the boxes of fish were carted off to different processing stands where the fish was filleted and whatever. And eventually it was all processed and packed, and whether it gone to local shops or hotels, restaurants, that type of thing. And then much of the fish went onto the 5 o'clock train, and that was a way down to Billingsgate and various places in the country. And before they built a bridge over the railway on the main road from Grimsby to Cleethorpes, 5 o'clock was a nightmare because the crossing gates were closed and the train was going backwards and forwards and picking up more trucks. And of course, it was the end of the working day as well for most people ashore, So, from midnight until about 6 o'clock in the evening, the dock was heaving, and then on the other side of the dock where you're preparing to sail, from 2 o'clock in the morning to lunchtime, whatever time the high water was, you usually sailed between 2 hours before and 2 hours after high water, depending on the range of the tide. If there was enough water, then the lock gates would be open for the 4 hours. If it was a small tide, then you might get less than 4 hours, and if it was a spring tide, you might have too much water, so they would close what they called the floodgates to stop the dock water rising too high. And then when the tide was dropping again, then they could open them again. So you on a spring tide, you would get sometimes a shorter sailing time, or available sailing time.
When you mentioned Cleethorpes here, John, I don't know if you know it. I'm sure you will, but I would say I would never go to Grimsby without going along to Cleethorpes for a fish and chips at Steele's.
Yes, Steele's is the corner house. It is an iconic fish.
Oh, what a
Fish
fish and
supper.
chip!
Yes, there's another one actually now as well in Cleethorpes in St Peter's Avenue. It's only a few minutes walk from Steele's, but the Ocean Fish Bar,
Okay,
that is quite amazing too. Really
excellent, brilliant.
top quality fish and chips.
Keeps the tradition going. That's great. And
Yeah,
when you were talking about the bobbers and all the different people involved, and earlier when you were saying about a hard life and hard people, I remember in Grimsby the sale was going on. The salesman stopped, booked the fish, and that was I can't remember the exact price, but that's the price. And this other buyer says, "Oh, I was bidding there. You've missed my bid." And the salesman says to him, "I'm sorry about that. I missed you. I'm sorry." And the buyer turned and says to him, "You won't miss me the next time. You'll feel me."
yeah. It was. I mean, when I was mate, I was on the pontoon every morning. We were landing fish and watch the sails and that, but it made very little sense to me. I could not follow that. I used to ask the merchant, what has that fish gone for? I had no idea. It was a unique auction. So.
Yeah, but not as unique as Hull, because Hull was the Dutch auction. It went down the way, whereas
Oh,
the
right.
bidding in Grimsby went up.
Okay. No, I never knew that.
Okay.
That's
You paint life at sea as brutally hard, but strangely honest. What did the sea give you that the shore life never could?
I don't know really. Since I've moved to West Yorkshire here, I've realised, talking to people, ex-miners, that sort of thing, how similar miners and fishermen were, and the camaraderie, the reliance on each other, doing your jobs to keep each other safe and to be productive as well. The very, very similar, and I'm sure everybody. I might be a bit naive, but I think everybody takes a pride in what they're doing, and if you enjoy your job, it's a bonus. It's an absolute bonus. My father once, he was a welder, and he couldn't understand why I love fishing so much. And I explained to him that if I was sitting home and thinking there's going to be fish at Cape Wrath when we go to sea, and if I went there, saw some marks on the echo sounder, towed the trawl through the marks a couple of times, and haul the net, and the fish floating to the surface, pulling the net up, coming up quite fast, a big patch of bubbles, and a lot of fish in your trawl floating. I said to him, I've set out what I did to do. What I wanted to do, I've done it, and there's nothing more rewarding. And I used to say to him, I said, if that fish comes up and floats like that, if I didn't need money to live, I would have been a fisherman for nothing, because that excitement of that bubbles coming up and everything, it just you being paid. and say that the love of it was just a bonus.
It's a funny mix what's going on there, John, because I class you as I mentioned earlier, as a successful fisherman. But the strange mix I'm going to come with here is a successful fisherman. When I say, sorry, obviously maybe it's somebody that's been my lifetime in the industry. If somebody says to me, right, you describe a successful fisherman, it's a strange mix, would you agree? Because a successful fisherman, I see it, is not somebody who catches more fish than somebody else. Yes, they catch fish and maybe in a way more than somebody else. But I've never met a fisherman who wants to catch the last species of anything. He's mindful. Yes, he catches fish and makes a decent pay, but he's mindful of the people coming after him, and he's mindful of the next generation and the sustainability of the stocks. Would you agree with that, John?
Absolutely, yes. The very often, I mean, it was a feast and famine always. And as fishermen, you were chasing the fish. When fish stock started to dwindle a bit, a lot of us took notice of that. And I was working for Terry Taylor in Aberdeen
Oh,
on a boat called the Pisces,
yeah, no,
and
Terry. Well,
I decided that I would. We got the net on the quay, and I put a square net mesh panel in the back of the net to allow the small fish to get away. Terry came down on the quay, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're putting in a square mesh panel, Terry." He said, "Oh, look, all the small fish will get away." I said, "Well, that is the idea, So, that was just a different sort of
you've
point of
got that.
view.
You've got that in the book.
Ah, dear. Yeah, it was it was a funny situation, that one.
Terry was a character.
Oh yeah, yeah, great guy though. Yeah, and good guy to work for.
I bet you. Yeah.
Uh,
In the book, John, you're clear it was never romantic work. What's the hardest truth about distance water fishing that armchair critics still don't grasp?
I think basically it's just the time away from home and from the family. Uh, you find, especially distant water fishing, you sail from Grimsby maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and that first day you're sort of full of remorse because you've left the family and everything, and then the next day it's right, crack on with work now, and but it was always at the time, and then be working away for maybe 10 days fishing, and everybody be working hard, and it was hard work. If there was no fish around, you were normally trying in rough ground and things like that, trying to. So very often, when there was no fish around, it was a harder trip than it was when there was a lot of fish around. It was an easier trip standing gutting all the time rather than repairing nets, and so it's like that. But and then when you set off for home, your mind started to think about home again, and getting home. You couldn't wait to get home and be back with the family and friends and go and have your 3 day millionaire buying things and having a few drinks. And it was, I think that was it. It was the isolation from your family. You had two families. You had your family ashore and you had your family on board. And of course, your family on board was all men, but your family at home was a you normal family, so.
Yeah, but I think that's what's quite unique about fishermen and on board boats. It's very true to think that because it's very few trades, don't know any other off my head, that you're actually when you're working with people, you're living with them, you're sleeping with them, you're eating with them, and that is quite unique. But the other point, John, what you just mentioned about the miners, I totally get what you're saying there, and this one of the fascinations I find, which would be interesting, your thoughts. I've never spoken to a fisherman who would go down a mine, and I've never spoken to a miner who would go to sea. So, as my mother would have said, each to their own.
Exactly, absolutely. About 5 miles from where I live now, there's the National Coal Mining Museum. That'd be 2 or 3 years ago now. I took my grandson there, and we'd booked a tour down the pit, and it was great experience, absolutely brilliant. And we spent the whole day there, 10 o'clock in the morning until 4:30, and it was a wonderful day out. And the guide who took us down the pit, and I said to him, I said, I was a fisherman, and I said, it's great to come down here and see what it was like. I said, but yeah, I wouldn't have done it every day. No. And so just emphasize and endorsing what you say, and he was the same opinion. He was quite happy mining, but he wouldn't have gone on a ship. Yeah. So I think your mother was quite right. Horses for courses.
Horses for courses, and yeah, exactly. People talk about good old days. From your own logbook and memory, was there really abundance or just hard men making do?
We didn't know any different. And same again, different fraternities. In the fishing fraternities, it was what you did. You went to sea, you worked hard, and if you was in a mining fraternity, you worked down the pit. That's what people did, and steel fraternity, people worked in the steel works. It's from the Industrial Revolution and the with steam driving the power sources for it was a great rejuvenation of everything. You big machinery driven by steam pumps and for the mines. And in Grimsby around the 1900s, they started building steam trawlers rather than drifters. And that was another thing about Grimsby. When that happened, they suddenly didn't have enough people. And so people came from all over the country, all over the UK, and even Denmark, came to Grimsby and worked on the steam trawlers. It was all part of this industrial revolution. As Fred Dibner would be the best guy to talk about it, but that's it really was a big change in everything when power was turned to steam.
You made a interesting comment of that in your book, in the quote, saying to a guy, "You're doing that like a farmer."
Yeah.
I am a farmer.
when I was a third hand, I got my third hand certificate at 18 years old, and you had to be 18 to sit for the ticket. And the course started, I think it was 2 days after my birthday, I think. And so I went and did that and passed my certificate. And then I was working in Ross Group, then in Ross Trawlers. The operations manager, Dennis Roberts, he was no relation, but he said, we sponsor the Sail Training Association. And he said, would you like to go and sail on the Sir Winston Churchill's Sail Training Association schooner 2 weeks and represent Ross Trawlers as a reward for getting your third-hand certificate at such a young age? And I said, yes, I'll do that. And like you say, we first night out at sea, we had to take in some sails and what have you, and we were pulling on a halyard, and that's just what I said to this lad. You're pulling on that like a farmer, and he said, I'm a farmer. That saying, I'm pulling on it like a farmer, one of my my sea dad, Bill Hodson, Skipper Bill Hodson, he taught me much of what I knew about fishing. And that was one of his sayings. If somebody wasn't performing very well, he'd say, you're pulling like a farmer, you know. So
Bill was
that's where that.
Bill was well known, wasn't he?
Oh yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I remember
The
Bill.
whole of the Hodson family. There was in my time there was Alfie, Alf Hodson Senior and Alf Hodson Junior. They both were fishermen, but the old Alf, he went to be the tutor at the school for fishermen, and then young Alf joined him later on, or took his place. I can't remember now, but anyway, young Alf he took it as well. Then there was Charlie, who was an older man. He'd been in the war and whatever, and torpedoed and all sorts. Then there was Bill and Jimmy. They were the next generation, and then there was the next generation, Freddie, who was a good friend of mine. But the Hodsons, they were all, I believe they in the 1900s, they came from the workhouse in Salford to work on trawlers. That's when the Hodson family came to Grimsby. Yeah, they were very successful, most of them, as fishermen.
John, if I could just take you back a minute, when you mentioned steam, I'm just wondering, well, before I ask, were you ever on steamboats? Because I can remember my father during the war, he was on minesweepers, and a lot of the minesweepers were trawlers. He said they were fantastic sea boats. He says, and when they were fishing, he says they would leave the harbour, they would be full of coal. And when they were coming back, they were full of fish. He says, fantastic ballast and sea boats.
Yeah. I never sailed in any coal burners. I was in plenty of steam trawlers, but they were all burnt. They burnt heavy oil in the boilers. But yeah, my first command was a steam trawler, the Northern Scepter, and she was a great ship. And like you say, most of them were wonderful sea ships. But yeah, what your father was saying, the after fish room, that was full of coal, and they would be burning coal going up to the fishing grounds, and then they would shift all the coal into the stokehold and into the engine room bunkers and clean the after fish room, and then they'd start putting the fish in there. So that's exactly right. There was a little tunnel through. Some ships had a little trolley to fill it with coal and shove it through. And then the firemen, and they would be trimmers would see to the coal and send it through, and the firemen would feed the boilers or the
Uh-huh.
furnaces.
John, the Cod Wars, it's a memory and a headline to me, but it was a lived reality to you. You describe moments when it stopped being politics and became genuinely dangerous. Steel hulls, cables, intimidation. When did you first realize this wasn't just posturing anymore?
Well, I think from day one, that we were fighting for our existence and for the existence of the job. Put it that way. We needed to fish at Iceland, and that was a recognised fact. And then when the Icelandic Coast Guard started cutting gears, and the fishermen said, "Okay, no, we're going to leave Iceland because we need some protection," and that got the owners then convinced the government to give us naval protection. That was interesting because when we were fishing, you had to fish in a group. If there was no fish in that area, we could vote to move the box where we were allowed to fish. And you could only fish in certain areas where the Navy could protect you. When we got the naval ships in, some of them were absolutely fantastic at protecting. They could get alongside of the AIA. That was the state of the art Coast Guard vessel, and they could shadow him through the group of ships fishing, and he couldn't escape. But others, they couldn't handle him. And we used to be thinking, who's protecting us? And they would come on the radio with a warning, Coast Guard vessel so and so is approaching, and depending on who was protecting us, we think, oh well, I'm going to get my gear up, or we'll be safe because those two guys, they really do look after us. They were exceptional seamen, and so it was interesting in that respect. There was one case where we were working in pairs, one ship fishing and the other ship guarding, and we were on the south side of Iceland, and Eddie Grant, he was mate on a ship called the Prince Philip, and they weren't fishing because the Coast Guard was around, and he didn't have a partner either, so there was a German ship, he was fishing, and so Eddie decided he would go and protect the German ship, or try to. And he did. The German ship had actually had his gear cut earlier in the day and put a new set of equipment on, and then the Coast Guard was after him again. And anyway, Eddie managed to stop him getting his gear cut a second time, so that was good. Now, many years later, I was on a 4-point anchor drilling ship. We were drilling the seabed off Helgoland to see if the seabed was strong enough to take windmills. And the weather was bad, so we went into Cuxhaven, and the Port Health came on board, and the boarding officer, he saw on the crew list I was from Grimsby, and he said, I know somebody in Grimsby. He was a fisherman at Iceland, and he protected me from getting my gear cut when I was a fisherman. And I sort of carried on the story and told him, and this German guy was amazed, and so was I. What a small world. But I remember what he said to Eddie. He said, if you come to Germany, you can eat my bread and drink my wine. that was his invite to Eddie. Yeah.
If I could take that on a bit, John, when you mention Iceland, Warped Cut, and German, can you tell our listeners about the time when the gunboat was calling up the Ross Renown had his names covered, so the gunboat was calling up the Ross Renown.
It was actually Ross Revenge. Yeah, no problem. But yeah, at one particular time, they was covering all the names up to stop identification, and so the mate of the Revenge was hauling one early morning before breakfast anyway, and the Coast Guard came along, and he started calling the Ross Revenge, and he was hindering him. He was trying to shoot the gear, but he kept getting in the way, so he couldn't shoot the gear. So he'd call the skipper out, John Meadows, and he probably wasn't in the best frame of mind being woken up. And the Coast Guard again called the Ross Revenge, and John came on the radio and he said, it's not the Ross Revenge. He said, it's the German trawler Heinz Beans.
That's pretty cool under the circumstances he was in.
It was. I think it was we must have been a bit crazy, We if we could make a laugh of adversity, we did.
Wow! Wow! How did it feel knowing you were effectively in the front line of an international dispute without any real protection?
I think it's a case of we don't understand diplomatic procedures. We do more straight talking than that. But it was a travesty, really, the Cod War, because in my own opinion, when at Iceland, I think they offered us 63,000 tons of fish as a quota. And whether it was greed or just mismanagement or what, I don't know. But it was thrown out. There's no way is 63,000 tons any good to us. We had ships in Grimsby, Hull, and Fleetwood fishing Iceland regular. A lot of the Grimsby ships, and some of the Hull ships in particular, they were ready for scrapping. They were old steamboats, all ready for scrapping. They had a number of diesel ships. In my own opinion, if they grasped the nettle and said, right, we're going to stop using the steamships, we'll just run the diesels and we'll accept the 63,000 tonnes, I believe we'd be fishing at Iceland today.
John, that's an interesting point you made there, and it's reminded me in my days going back and forth to Grimsby, and I was told that very point on the docks in Grimsby by the men involved in the industry. And seemingly, I'm sure you'll know all this, but at that time, the politicians, obviously, who were negotiating with Iceland, the industry was saying that very thing. Look, there's ships going to be scrapped. It's a diminishing fleet. And they said, I think, if I'm not correct, I think they managed to negotiate it up to 70,000. The 70,000 ton is in my head, but maybe that was just our own figure and maybe it wasn't. But the industry was saying to the politicians, accept it. That, after the way the fleet is going, that could be a target for us rather than a restriction. And the politicians said, there's no way, we're Great Britain. There's no way a small island in the North Atlantic's going to tell Britain what to do. And they just blew it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. I've never not heard about any increase or anything that, but certainly, it was mismanagement really. By whoever whether it was government or trawler owners, it was just a mismanaging.
I think it was a Labour government at the time, and one of the he was in the government was a guy from the Humberside, one of the constituencies.
Anthony Crossland.
Was that who it was? Yeah.
Maybe. I may be wrong, but I think that was Anthony Crossland. He was MP for Grimsby.
Okay.
And he was one of the ministers involved in the negotiations. So.
Oh dear! But, you wonder at times if they're any better.
My personal feeling is that the fishing industry, excuse the pun, the fishing industry are minnows when it comes to trading with the other countries in Europe. In fact, and that many of the European countries have a bigger respect for the fishing industry than our own successive governments have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Successive governments, all colours.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's went down to the Thames in 1976, I think it was, and there was demonstration. Fishing boats from all over the country, and I was in the Ross Kashmir. We were tied up to a mooring buoy just below Tower Bridge. So it was ourselves and the Arctic Vandal up there, went through the Tower Bridge, Suffolk Conquest, and I think it was Boston might have been the Blenheim or Beverley. They went up through Tower Bridge, and there was hundreds of small boats. And the whole point was asking John Silkin to not capitulate to the EU fishery policy, which of course they did, and that was another nail in the coffin for the industry in Grimsby.
Yeah. Wow. John, you're very restrained in the book about blame, and I'll ask you it blunt. Do you think fishermen were sacrificed for diplomatic convenience?
Oh, absolutely, yes. As I said, with minnows in the grand scheme of the productivity of the UK, it was just a sacrificial lamb. To get access to other markets or whatever. It's very sad, really. But and now, when the industry was dying, myself, I went into seismic survey and searching for oil and gas. But I'm just wondering now what's going to happen with that, because everything's going to clean energy, and that's one escape route from fishing that there's going to be no longer. But then you got people across the water there, like Trump, and that they say, well, the environmental programs are are not worth the paper they're printed on. We're just going to keep using oil. So, and it seems futile that we've got this zero emissions plan, and you've got massive countries like China and the States and India. They're pumping carbon into the atmosphere as hand over fist, and our stance of not doing that is futile, in my opinion. But again, you're coming into diplomatic discussions and that, and it's just crazy, really, that the productive countries in the world that are pumping all this carbon into the atmosphere, they're not going to listen to ourselves saying, well, we've cut to zero emissions. They say, well, good for you, do you want to buy some electricity or some oil or some power?
Well, as a man you mentioned, Trump, listening to a speech when he says, a windmill, every time the blades go round, it's costing more money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can. No, I just cannot understand why, like rivers like the Humber and the Thames and Mersey, where you've got and the Severn, where they've got these big tide flows. Why we're not developing turbines, water-driven turbines? Tides are there twice a day, every
Mm-hmm.
day. It doesn't matter if
Strong,
the wind's blowing. It doesn't matter if the sun's shining.
be strong tides too, is it?
Those tides will develop electricity every day if we can harness the power.
Yeah. They do that in Orkney.
That's the wave action, isn't it? That one, I think.
All right, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I'm just saying where you've got 3 and 4 knot current running up and
Yeah.
down the rivers. It's
Did you ever
it's
did
just
you ever feel the British public understood what was happening to men like you out there, or were you invisible once you left the docks?
no, I don't think so. But particularly in the Cod Wars, because you're getting clips on the TV news and things like that, and people were interested certainly everywhere. There was big interest in the Cod Wars, but on the other hand, at that same time, again, you was getting to where mines were closing, steelworks were closing, so everybody was concentrating on their own environment. It more so, I think, they had sympathies, but the biggest sympathies was with their own environments because everything was closing. I mentioned before Fred Dibner. I mean, he said that Great Britain was built by men in boiler suits and caps, and he said Britain's being destroyed by men in grey suits and ties. It's pretty much right.
That's and I honestly didn't hear that. I was very much followed Fred Dibner. He was a great character, and a cousin of mine was a good friend of his, and he said when he was on these television programs, he wasn't an actor. What you
No,
saw was what you got.
exactly, yeah. Funny thing about him, well, not about him. I was watching a program been recorded about one of the guys who used to go on the traction engine with him and talking about how he was. It was after his death, unfortunately. And the interviewer, he said to this man, he says, well, what sort of speed did you do on that traction engine? He said, oh, about 3 pubs an hour. And that that
Wonderful.
made me laugh. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. You described coming back to Grimsby and sensing something had shifted, not overnight, but permanently. When did you know that the fleet wasn't coming back and the port was going the wrong way, maybe?
Yeah, well, although we didn't realize it at the time, about 1980, 81, it became where every time we came into dock, we had to sign off the articles and then sign on again when we sailed. And realizing later that that was to break continuity of employment. And then in 1980, around that same time, or a little bit later, 82, 83, the European Union wanted to reduce the fishing power. And so the UK government, they said, right, we will offer £400 per gross ton of your ship's fishing license if you stop fishing. And that became attractive to what was then British United Trawlers, which had taken in Ross and associated fisheries. And so I can't remember now how much it was. So something like £1.3 million was paid to British United Trawlers for the surrender of their fishing licenses. We were called into the office just before Christmas in '83, and we were told that over the next 6 months all the ships would be taken and go on to oil rig standby. And that was a body blow. That was the coup de grace, really. That's when we've realised that we were in really serious trouble.
And what happened to the men when the boat did stop sailing? When you think of the skill and the pride and the sense of purpose.
Yeah, I mean, people diversified. Myself, I went into pear trawling. That's when I met you.
Yeah.
Up in Wick and
No,
Scripter.
I first met you on the Lady Rachel.
Oh, well, that was after pear trawling.
Oh, was it? Oh,
Yeah, I was in the Delvan.
oh yeah, and Caroline.
Graham Hall.
Graham
He
Hall.
was the lead skipper, and he was in his boat, the Caroline.
That was a Delvan and Caroline, wasn't it?
Aye,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Good
I
boats.
remember.
Oh yeah. It wasn't for me really. I've been used to the bigger ships and whatever. It was interesting, and it was a means to an end. But we came home one trip and to Grimsby instead of just being in Wick or Scrabster. We came home to Grimsby and I was sitting. I'd been changing filters and all kinds of engine room work before I came home. And I was sitting in the bath, and Michelle said, "Oh, there's somebody just been on the phone for you, John Richardson. He said he wants you to ring him when you out the bath." And I'm sat there looking at my leg with all the oil impregnated hair follicles, and anyway, got cleaned up and rang John, and he said, "Could you come down? I've got a proposition for you." And I went down to his office, and he said, "There's a ship called the Lady Rachel coming to Grimsby, and the owner would be keen if you would like to take the ship." I said, "Okay." I said, "Where is she now?" And he said, "She's in Plymouth." And I said, "Well, how can I need to go and see the ship." So he said, "Well, she's sailing tonight." I said, "Well, can you stop her? I'll go to Plymouth and I'll sail up to Grimsby on the Lady Rachel, and when we get to Grimsby, I'll tell you if I want the job or not." And so that's what I did. I got on the train, arrived in Plymouth about midnight, and I was taken to the ship, and we sailed the next day and up to Grimsby. And I thought, yes, I can see this being a success. And that's when I went in the Lady Rachel. Yeah. So
But when you said it wasn't for earlier, when you said it wasn't for you with the pier trawling and that, my goodness, when you think of and a lot of fishermen of your type, Pete Pulfrey, a number of Grimsby, maybe Hull as well, fishermen at the time who were pier trawling Papa Bang and landing in our area. My goodness, no wonder when you think what you've come through. You've been in Cod Wars, you've been deep sea fishing, you've been north in Norway, off the Russian coast, and in the Cold War. It's just incredible what a career you've all had. I said you all have. Were you quite unique in that, or was that just the way it was for you, all you guys?
I think, particularly the skippers and mates as well. They were all different sort of levels. They were all very similar. I think it was. Yeah, some guys were very courageous and very outgoing and whatever, and that, and others were quieter but still plodded along and did their thing. Determination, I think, is the common denominator. Every one of the skippers were determined to try and do their best and be successful.
It's a fantastic way of life, it really is. And real strong characters.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Everyone in their own way as well. It wasn't just a stereotype and you were programmed. You all had your own characters and ideas. Do you feel the loss of the Grimsby's distant water fleet was ever properly acknowledged, or did it just fade from national memory?
Well, it's still alive. The memories are still alive today. I mean, like the Heritage Centre in Grimsby and Hull, they do a very good job bringing the history to the local people and to visitors from different parts of the country. I think with modern day technology, with the Minecraft and all these fortnights and things on the TV and online. All the much of the entertainment has gone online or to TV, and so I think that's probably reduced the interest in history, like not history, in museums possibly, but probably has faded somewhat. But there's still quite a few people interested in what the fishing industry was.
Good, good. It's important, and that should never be lost or forgotten. You make it clear fishermen have always adapted when rules were fair. What's the biggest misunderstanding modern policymakers have about fishing effort and control?
I don't really know because I've been so long away now from the fishing industry. I think, as I mentioned earlier, about in the 80s when they wanted to reduce the fishing power of the European ships, they took the licenses and people sold their licenses privately to other, like you get skippers of small old wooden boats maybe, and they would sell their license to a larger company who was building a new ship. So you've removed the fishing power of an old inefficient boat and put the fishing license onto a state-of-the-art, very efficient fishing machine. So instead of actually reducing the fishing power, they actually increased it.
Yeah. We have a situation, we used to be, well, not unfortunately any longer. There's no fishing boats almost left in Wick, but when there was a fleet of sea net boats, well, you could say it's the same. There was a fleet of sea net boats in Wick, John. All wooden sea net boats from about, say, 55 to 65 feet. And there's now one WK registered fishing boat, the Boy Andra, and which is probably as efficient and effective as the whole fleet were in the past.
Yes, yeah. And that was Boy Andrew. That's an iconic
Absolutely
name in Wick, certainly in Wick and in Scotland, probably.
Yeah,
and
UK, UK out or Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Norrie Bremner. He was I believe he was the instigator of that start of that fishing.
So I'll stop you there, John.
Company.
I'll stop you there. I was at the World Fishing Exhibition in Iceland, and that would be 80s, back in the 80s. And I was going around with this Icelandic guy that I did business with and knew well. So we were going around the exhibition and talking to different people. And there was this Icelandic fisherman and a group, and we walked to them. And my friend Ali, the Icelander, he says, "Oh, let me introduce you to my friend Jim. He's from Wick in Scotland." And one of them turned and says, Wick, do you know Norrie?" No, Mr. Bremner, Boy Andrew, do you know Norrie?
Yeah. So
that's always fascinated me.
If somebody didn't know Norrie, then they were really out of touch.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So, but I mean, Andrew himself, he's carried on now. I believe his boy is now
very
uh,
successful. It's a great
skipper.
story.
Yeah,
It's an absolute amazing story when you think what Nori
yes,
created and came through. Then
hmm
Andrew, young lad, became very
yeah,
successful, and now, and the other thing that I like about them, I think, is fantastic and speaks volumes. They're just so respectful of each other.
yes, yeah. They always were, and I
Yeah,
guess they always will be.
yeah,
Great
definitely.
people.
Absolute top, top,
Hmm
top. If I could go back a wee bit, John, to a comment, it's amazing when talking to you because there's so many things, memories coming back to me and quotes that I can remember and situations I was in. A point you made earlier, what we used to feel in the fishing was I would do something else, but I don't know anything else.
Yeah, that rings a bell. And that was like you say, and many of us were very versatile at picking up new trends. And when I finished fishing, and I went into the seismic industry as a fishery liaison, and that was we're working on the seismic ships to try and make plans between the fishermen and the navigators of the seismic ship, so that both industries should work to beside each other at the right time of day and things like that. And on board the seismic ships, I saw all this computerized stuff going on. And I thought to myself, if you don't pick up something about computers while you're here, it's a chance missed. And so I did try and learn quite a bit about computer, and not so much programming or anything like that, but just to use Word and to use Excel, that sort of thing, PowerPoint. So, and it put me in good stead for later on in life. I remember my two sons, they're in their 50s now, but they had a Commodore 64 computer, one of the very early computers. And if I was home, they would come to me and say, "Oh, there's a problem with this." And I used to say, "Oh, go and see Roger next door," because I had no idea until I went into the seismic ships what wonderful tools computers can be.
Yeah, but John, I'll pull you up on that one. I've heard this many times from fishermen, skippers as well. But I'll either think about it and then I'll say to them, look, you're saying you don't know what to do with this computer or anything relating to technology. I'll say, look back, you've taken the biggest trawlers all over the North Atlantic and something goes wrong and you fix it. And now you
Yeah.
have something in front. What if
Yeah.
you? What do
Yeah.
you?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what we often used to say on board the ships, on the trawlers. Well, this is broken. Okay, we have to fix it. There's no shops here. We can't get a new one. You have to fix it or find a way around it, and that's what we used to do.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
always fascinated me. That included technology as well. That wasn't just if the net wasn't fishing well. If there was something in the wheelhouse that wasn't working, you
hmm
fixed it.
Yeah, you had about the old radars and radios, and even the fish finders, that sort of thing. You'd be changed. There's something not working. Okay, would change stylus, would change valves, different valves and things like that. Maybe a card. In later years, it was.
Maybe the guys struggling with the computer should say to you, John, if you fix this, you'll catch more fish.
Yes, yeah, that would be a good incentive.
When you hear today's language, spatial squeeze, marine planning, net zero, does it feel familiar to you what you lived through?
Uh, I mean, maritime industry. It's particularly since 9/11. ISPS came in, the ship security and things like that, and the ISM codes, that sort of thing, with safety. When in the seismic ships, when I was last few years when I was master, and I never went on the bridge hardly. Well, only for coffee, but I never took command of the bridge unless we're going into port or out of port. and the rest of my time was 80% of the time I was working on safety management on board. And that is, I mean, it can be a good thing, and it has been a good thing. It's reduced accidents and that, but it's gone from one extreme to the other, And I think very often the fishing boats have had really big struggles to comply with new legislation about safety equipment and what they can do and what they can't do, and it, as I say, it's good that it's reduced accidents, but it may have gone too far. It's gone from a risky business to, in many occasions, an unworkable business because of the restrictions.
Yeah, I think fishermen feel now it's not just a case of catching fish. Maybe it never was that, but there now have to be lawyers, accountants, politicians.
Yeah, it's a bit different now. I mean, when we were fishing skippers and that, we were the skipper, we were the doctor, we were the marriage counsellor,
Yeah,
and the fireman. you know, so, but like you say now, you're a skipper, you're a lawyer, you're an accountant. I don't know. It's
John,
human resources manager.
if a young fisherman read your book today, what warning would you hope they take seriously?
Oh, uh, certainly, for sure. That the fishing industry is not a secure business, and if you're working in the industry, you maybe have to have one ear to the ground and other opportunities. But I mean, my book, it tells a story of what I consider to be an excellent life. I had a fantastic life, working life, and enjoyed most of the time. Not most, vast majority of the time, I enjoyed what I was doing. But how difficult it is nowadays for younger guys to do that. I'm sure it's not so easy. Not only in fishing, I mean everywhere. Everybody's trying to cut down on labour, and and the population's growing. How is it going to be financed? And then they're talking now about using more and more AI. They're just destroying human jobs, and in the name of progress. But I guess sadly, this my opinion. That all the conflicts that there are in the world is interlinked with all this, where people are finding employment more and more difficult to find, and rebelling against it. It's a sad state of affairs. It's a terrible world we live in at the moment, I think.
It's very scary indeed, indeed. You didn't write this book, John, to seek sympathy. What did you most want to set straight while here there were still witnesses alive?
Yeah, the idea, it wasn't my idea at all. And when I retired from the seismic and went to work at the Grimsby Fishing Heritage Centre as a trawler guide on the Ross Tiger, the operations manager in the museum, David Ormsby, he said many times, he said, "You older fishermen, you need to get your stories written down or recorded, because if you don't, they'll be lost forever." And I took that on board, and I spent oscillating during about 4 winters, oscillating and in the mood and not in the mood, writing a bit, stopping, and writing a bit and stopping. The reason I wrote the book was on David's advice. When I actually completed the book, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a very satisfying accomplishment to get it finished. And then I approached Michael Terence Publishing to see if they thought it would be worth publishing, and they jumped at the chance when they read the manuscript, and jumped at the chance. And I'm very appreciative to their help and getting it put out there.
And you should be very proud of it, John. It's a really fantastic read. What was the hardest passage to write, the moment that brought it all back?
I don't really know where I think possibly where people getting injured and some of them quite severe injuries, But fortunately, we never had any fatalities. We had some close calls, but it was. There's so many different things. I don't think I wouldn't have said any of the book was hard to write. It was just taking the time and thinking about it. And my written English is not my strongest subject. I couldn't read until I was about 13. So technology, I've just been knocking technology, but Word, I think it was Word 10, when you would write in a report, it would underline spelling mistake. And instead of going to the spell checker, I used to try and correct the word. And so that Word 10, it improved my spelling tremendously.
Good.
But yeah,
Every what's the saying? Every day is a school day. You're learning something every day.
absolutely. I,
Yeah,
I often say that you learn something every day,
yeah.
So
If a policymaker read only one chapter, what should it be, and what lesson should make them uncomfortable?
whew, uh, I guess the chapter about the end of the catboats, the 1983-84 section where the as I said, the aim was to reduce the fishing power, but the policy actually increased the fishing power of the European ships. It's just by the inefficient boats being scrapped, and they transferred the licenses to far more efficient boats. It was contradictory to what the policy was aimed at.
After everything, danger, loss, politics, what are you most proud of from your life at sea?
Yeah, being successful in various denominations, uh, working my way through the ranks quite young, diversifying into seismic was a good thing, But I mean, I must congratulate the skippers that I sailed with. I learnt something from all of them. It was they were fantastic guys. They were workmasters. I mean, I went mate. It just you worked hard and you learnt from them all. And the harder you worked, the more interested they were in you learning from them.
Yeah, yeah. I would have put you in that category with a lot of other younger people that sailed with you.
Yes, yeah, it was. Again, we even latter years in the fishing boats and ships, we always had an element of fun to pass on the experience. And my son, my young son, he's mastering seismic ships now. He first came with us in the Pisces as when he left school, trainee fisherman. At that time, I was speaking to a lot of the Scottish boats. He would come and stand on the bridge, and I'd be talking to various people, Jan Oodle and Norrie and Andrew maybe, and when we finished talking, exchanging information, what we were fishing, what we were catching, and what have you, and what other people were doing. When I put the telephone down, my son used to say, "What did they say?" He'd been listening. He'd been listening, but you can he, he didn't recognize the mannerisms and the accents, So I had to translate to him then what people had been saying.
Yeah, Ken was used a lot. I remember saying to Jimmy Buchan and Peter Heed,
Yeah,
who's Ken? Ken
yeah,
this.
yeah.
If the dogs of Grimsby could speak today, what truth would they tell about how fishermen were treated?
Uh, it was. I'm sure that from a doc's point of view, there's a lot of sympathy. Now they're involved. The dock is now involved in the wind farm servicing boats, and there are still some fishermen, I think, involved in those boats, getting quite older now, but there are some still involved in it. And again, they've found or diversified into an industry that's current. They've gone from the fishery to various other jobs and finished up now in these some of these wind farm servicing boats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very much the same as Wick. There's hardly a fishing boat left in Wick, but
Hmm.
there is a lot of wind farm boats.
Yeah.
John, throughout your career, you have caught and landed numerous fish species from many different parts of the world. If you had your choice today of a seafood meal, what species would you choose? And which fishing grounds and what dish would you make with it?
Mm. I think that is a difficult question, because apart from Tusk, I think uh, most fish I've always enjoyed, but it needs to be reasonably fresh. My favourite, I think, is what we call ginny wings. Yeah, yeah, the small skate wings. Just coat them in flour and hot shallow fry them so the ends of the wings curl up and get crispy, and then with some salt and vinegar on there. Yeah, I think that's my favourite.
The reason I asked about the different grounds is because as you're in the job, it's definitely, because I know myself, that they even say, obviously, haddock are very popular in Scotland. A lot of fishermen and people in the industry generally, they would have a Rockall haddock before maybe a North Sea haddock.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. They're much cleaner tasting and beautiful fish. Rockall haddock and Faroese haddock too.
Okay.
I find them very good. But yeah, I must agree. I think Rockall haddock is the tops in the haddock league.
Uh-huh. I find round the Shetlands they're every bit as good as Rockall.
Hmm. Yeah, we used to fish Escherness and
Uh-huh.
uh, just outside of Scalloway, Grutinvo, and well, October time, the herring spawn was about. You'd
Ah,
sometimes get some heavy fishing along there,
Spawny
and
haddocks.
yeah, but
Very tasty.
I do remember very often in the North Sea the haddocks. We used to call them weedy haddocks,
Uh-huh.
and if they'd been eating weed, you could get a fish supper from the fish shop and break the batter, and you think, oh God, that's a weedy haddock that you could smell.
And
But
was it was a strong smell when you were gutting them as well.
the now up in the Barents Sea, north of Bear Island, there used to be some berries, tiny berries that fish would feed on, and yeah, they were called stinkers. And as soon as you open those fish gutting them and that, oh, it was a horrible smell. And the fish was impregnated with it, and unless there was no fish on the market or very little fish on the market, you couldn't sell them.
Uh-huh. Yeah. John, get back over the book. I just think I'm quite sure you appreciate it yourself, but it just shows what an amazing career and life you've had. You mentioned things about coming along the north of Iceland and down from northern Norway and Barents Sea, and that you must have had some amazing sights and experiences.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. There's fantastic sights, and like coming through the Norwegian fjords in the winter time, that was great. Like sea life as well. Dolphins and whales. Absolutely amazing. Some of the things you see. I remember one time uh, I was mate, and we were steaming up the Norwegian coast, and we must have been around the Arctic Circle, around 66 degrees north, and it was early in the morning, and it was summertime, and the sun was just coming down. I think it was May, end of May, something like that. The sun was coming down, and then all of a sudden it looked like it bounced on the Norwegian mountains and started to go up again.
Oh, gee,
It was sunset and sunrise was at the same time of the day,
my
and
goodness.
that was quite amazing.
And you'll have obviously been as what's called the land of the midnight sun.
Oh yes, yeah,
Yeah.
but there's always a payback for that.
Okay.
Well, in December it gets about half light around 11 a.m., 11:30,
Yeah.
and it's full dark again by 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
We have a bit of that here in the dead of winter. It's amazing how now we're in February and it's going the other way. But right in the dead of winter here, it'll be after 9 o'clock before we have daylight, and by 3 in the afternoon it's darkness.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that part's amazed me, John. How even just say the distance from the north of Scotland to south of England, you can notice a difference. And
yeah.
when you look at the globe, it's not that far apart from a
No,
global
that's
point
right.
of view. Okay, John. Well, where can our listeners follow you online?
I'm I'm on Facebook. On Facebook, just as John Roberts, the capital J and the R. I'm on Instagram as all lowercase Skipper John Roberts, all one word, and the Great Grimsby Fishing History uh, channel. That's a Facebook page, and I'll often pop up on the Aberdeen Trawlerman's site, history site, Hull One, Fleetwood, Lowestoft. If there's something that I can add to or comment on. So the book, the Welcome Home, Fish or No Fish, that's available in Waterstones. It's available on Amazon and Kindle, and it's also available in the Grimsby Fishing Heritage Centre.
Oh, that's good. That's good
So,
that they support you.
Oh yeah,
That's
absolutely.
fantastic. Yeah. It obviously comes across well. It's funny the different terminologies we have. You talk about mistress, the sea. We talk about salt in the blood.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I can
that's
see,
right.
I can hear and see it's still there with yourself.
Oh yes, yes, very much so. Yes, yes. It's
Well,
I would I play music quite a lot on an evening on YouTube, and I often put on Celtic Thunder, and they sing a song called "Home from the Sea."
oh yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
That's a nice song.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're absolutely fantastic song.
yeah. Another saying, you can take the man from the sea, but you can't take the sea from the man.
That's right. Absolutely, agree totally. Yeah,
Well, John, I would just say thank you very much. We'll fold up and really genuinely thank you and good luck with your book. Hope
and
because it's a brilliant read. I genuinely
thank you
mean that.
very much. Thank you for the compliments, Jim, and thank you for inviting me onto your channel. And if we can do another one, maybe about the seismic industry, that will be fine.
Take it as done. We'll be doing it. Yeah.
Okay.
Looking forward to it already. Thank you, John.